So what happens when a doctor makes a mistake? It's a question that, really gets to the heart of our trust in medicine. And for more than 60 years, the answer has come down to this one powerful legal idea, the Bolam test. Today, we're going to unpack exactly how it works and why it's still so incredibly important. Here's the big question, right? In any job where the stakes are high, think doctors, engineers, you name it, mistakes can happen. But when does a simple error cross the line and become negligence in the eyes of the law? How do you even begin to judge the split-second decision of an expert? Okay, so before we can get to the legal answer, we have to back up a little and really understand the problem from the professional's point of view. It all comes down to the tricky nature of expert judgment. Look, medicine isn't always black and white. It's an art just as much as it's a science. For almost any condition you can think of, there can be multiple, totally valid ways to treat it. One highly respected doctor might say, let's take a conservative approach, while another equally brilliant doctor might say, no, we need to be more aggressive. And that creates a huge problem for the legal system. If a patient gets hurt, can they sue a doctor just because some other expert would have done things differently? That exact question ended up in a British courtroom way back in the 1950s, and the answer? Well, it changed everything. See, this legal standard wasn't dreamed up in some law library. It was forged from the real-life story of one man, Mr. Bolam. Our story starts with a real person, John Bolam. He had voluntarily checked into a mental health institution, really just looking for a way to get a handle on his severe depression. Now, the treatment he received was electroconvulsive therapy, or ECT, and while that might sound pretty dramatic to us today, you have to remember back then it was a totally mainstream and accepted medical procedure for his condition. But here's where it all went wrong. During one of his treatments, the convulsions were just so severe that Mr. Bolam actually suffered serious fractures to his pelvis. He was convinced the hospital was at fault, and he decided to sue them for negligence. And this is where things get really interesting. Mr. Bolam's lawyers argue the hospital was negligent for two main reasons. They didn't give him any muscle relaxants, and they didn't restrain him during the procedure. But the hospital's defense was fascinating. They said, hold on, many respected doctors at the time don't use relaxants, and some even believe that restraining a patient could actually increase the risk of injury. So the court was faced with two completely opposite points of view, both supported by medical professionals. This set the stage for a truly landmark decision. The judge's next words wouldn't just decide Mr. Bolam's case, they were going to echo through courtrooms for decades and decades to come. So after the injury in the early 50s and filing the lawsuit, the case finally gets to the High Court in 1957. And the judge, he had to give the jury a really clear standard to judge the hospital's actions by. What was the rule book here? And there it is. In his instructions to the jury, the judge laid out the principle that would become law. He basically told them that a doctor isn't negligent just because other doctors might have done it differently. As long as their actions are supported by a responsible body of medical opinion, they have met the standard of care. This one idea became the Bolam test. So, what does this actually mean in the real world? Let's break down what the test is really all about. To put it simply, the Bolam test says this: a professional isn't negligent if they can prove that a respectable group of their peers would have done the exact same thing. The fact that another group of experts disagrees, even if it's a bigger group, isn't enough to prove negligence. So in practice, it really boils down to two key questions. First, was what they did in line with an accepted practice at the time? And second, is that practice supported by a responsible group of their peers? If the answer is yes to both of those, then according to the Bolam test, there's no negligence. Simple as that. And this really gets to the heart of it. The law isn't asking for perfection. It's not asking for the single best course of action, because let's be honest, that often doesn't even exist. It's just asking, did you meet the standard of a reasonably competent professional? And that brings us to today. I mean, why are we still talking about a court case from 1957? Well, because its legacy is absolutely enormous. The Bolam test is still the cornerstone of medical negligence law in the UK and a ton of other countries. It gives doctors the confidence to make those tough judgment calls without constantly looking over their shoulder, worried about being sued just because another expert has a different opinion. It actually helps innovation, too, because a new technique can be defended as long as it's supported by a responsible group of pioneers. And its logic is so solid that it's been stretched to cover all sorts of other professions, like lawyers and architects. So why does any of this matter to you? Well, because this test defines your rights as a patient.
It sets the bar for the standard of care that you are legally owed by any medical professional. It's not a guarantee of perfection, but it is a guarantee of responsible, competent practice.
But, and this is a really important but, it's not a blank check for doctors. Over the years, critics argued the test was maybe a little too friendly to doctors, basically letting the profession police itself. So the courts have added a crucial update. A professional opinion also has to be logical. This means a judge can now throw out an expert opinion if it just doesn't hold up to common sense scrutiny, like if it completely ignores obvious risks or isn't based on any real evidence.
And that leaves us with this one last crucial question to think about. In our modern age of evidence-based medicine, patient rights, and instant access to information, is a standard that was created in 1957, one that relies on the opinion of a responsible body of medical men, still the right way to balance patient safety and professional freedom? That's a debate that is still shaping the very definition of a doctor's duty today.